Why did the Russian defense minister go to China? What happened that he has to ask for help while there are no instructions from the dictator, but there are other possible allies? We'll discuss how NATO is reaching out to Putin and declaring its readiness to stop him, as well as what Trump knew before the invasion and how it can help us. Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis, Vezha. Valeriy, glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. A meeting of the Chinese and Russian defense ministers, probably important for Russia, took place in Beijing. Russian Minister of Aggression Andrei Belousov met with his Chinese counterpart. They talked about deepening strategic coordination, efficiency of cooperation, and firm defense of common interests. This will allow us to maintain global strategic stability together. The military must adhere to the defined directions. Belousov says that Russia and China share common views on the situation in the world. Belousov said this at the meeting. What did Belousov say? What will all this lead to? This year we celebrate the 75th anniversary of our relations. We have a common history and a long way to go. We held meaningful talks with the Chinese defense minister. We share common views, common assessments of the situation, and a common understanding of what needs to be done. Thanks to the efforts of the leaders, Comrade President Xi and Putin, we have a strategic partnership. The Institute for the Study of War analyzed Belousov's trip, noting that the joint exercises are a manifestation of the enhanced defense cooperation between Russia and China. Both sides can learn valuable lessons from each other, which improves interaction and can shape military doctrine. In the future, the Russian military may teach the Chinese lessons from the war in Ukraine. Valeriy, the Chinese conducted an exercise near Taiwan to simulate a blockade. They claim that they do not help in circumventing sanctions, but Belousov is being met in Beijing. The information policy of both Russia and China remains unchanged. But let me make it clear that China's exercises around Taiwan have not ended. They are open-ended and ongoing. This is an important detail. Further, the escalation on the Korean Peninsula is favorable for us, as Kim Jong-un is thinking about sending his troops to Russia to participate in a war against us. There are already intentions to send a 10,000th contingent, and this is currently being discussed in the Kremlin. There are both opponents and supporters of the idea of using the Chinese on the Kursk direction. The cooperation between China and Russia is not new. They have held regular military exercises at sea and on land for some time. Their partnership programs have been in place for a while, and now they are publicly reaffirming their commitment to cooperate. However, China is not seeking an alliance with Russia, whereas Russia is eager to find such alliances. This alliance may be formalized in the State Duma, where a strategic partnership agreement with North Korea will be ratified. China engages in partnerships based on common interests and implements projects in various fields, especially to acquire military technology.
Китай залучається такими партнерськими зв'язками, шукаючи спільні інтереси, реалізовуючи проекти в різних сферах, тому що Китаю дуже важливо мати військові технології. Це всі знають.
China is preparing for war against the West, as stated by its defense minister a few days ago. Various estimates suggest that China will be ready in 2 to 3 years. By demonstrating military presence near Taiwan, it signals to the United States that it is prepared for confrontation.
Він вказує Сполученим Штатам Америки на те, що він готовий до конфронтації і так далі.
And Belousov's visit is a demonstration of further cooperation in the military sphere.
Демонстрація подальшої співпраці у військовій сфері.
The West should not relax. It should think. I was shocked by the comment of a former military official, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who says that, I regret very much that NATO, during my time, not as a leader, but as a Secretary General, did not provide Ukraine with enough weapons to prevent a large-scale invasion. But I support Angela Merkel's policy of appeasement of Russia, and says, well, the problem is that the EU does not spend the entire EU does not spend as much on its defense as Russia alone. In the end, we have to somehow knock on Europe and everyone else, even though they are well aware of it, to speak out loud. It is difficult for us, for example, to change their minds, their approach to changing the global strategy specifically, to counteract this triangle that exists. It still lacks Iran, and we need to add Tehran. But so far, they are only talking in the context of Iran allegedly being able to talk to someone somewhere. Although, in my opinion, this is also a pretense, and it is an illusion. Iran will continue its policy of supporting terrorist organizations in the Middle East. As for China and Russia, yes, they will continue to cooperate. There is one significant scenario that, in my opinion, is not very attractive for Ukraine right now. It is the subjectivization of Putin, his return to a high role, and the subjectivization of Kim Jong-un through Joseph Biden's statement before the talks. And now Belousov has gone to Beijing with completely different positions. If earlier, well, yes, vassals, not discussed at all. Now they will say, look, you see, Washington wants to talk to us. We are sleeping on something here. We can. And if Beijing used to be rather cautious, even silent, about Pyongyang's cooperation with Moscow, that is, they were silent. Now Beijing says, yes, we maintain our relations with North Korea, because they have seen that North Korea has received more money, resources, it is developing, it is growing, it is becoming more powerful.
Продовжує нарощувати експорт нафти, і вона на 70% збільшила продаж нафти на зовнішні ринки і має до бюджету лише від...
Russia has increased oil exports by 70%, generating nearly $200 billion for its budget, surpassing last year's figures. Given this situation, I pose a rhetorical question to our Western partners. Do you recognize how this axis of evil is uniting and enhancing its power? What actions are you taking in response?
Які дії ви у відповідь робите? Мені подобається, що ви там будете виробляти у 27-му році мільйон снарядів на заводі Раймету, але Росія в день 10 тисяч випускає по Україні.
I appreciate that Rheinmetall will produce 1 million shells by 2027, but Russia fires 10,000 shells daily into Ukraine and will keep escalating. We must significantly ramp up our defense spending to at least €1 trillion, similar to the United States, instead of the current $100 billion. It is precisely in accordance with this institution that its functioning fully reflects both its form and essence. Let's just say that Putin has put in this place a piece of paper that in principle he can wipe himself with. And this is the State Duma, along with everything else that the Russian dictator and his deputies use in terms of legislation, like the Russian Constitution, to wipe themselves with. The draft law on the ratification of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement with the DPRK is also an element of showmanship. Look, we are in touch with these people, with this triangle, and we can defiantly sign agreements, invite soldiers in this or that guise, because we will not be penalized for this. Yes, this is true. Now, Russia is actually demonstrating a willingness to go further and further into escalation and test Europe's red lines. If earlier the Kremlin's red lines were tested, now Russia is testing Europe's red lines. Joseph Borrell also spoke about this yesterday, and a lot of Western press writes about it. This is what intelligence agencies, including MI6 and German intelligence, are saying. They say that today Russia is demonstrating how far it can go. This story, with the ratification of the Strategic Cooperation Agreement with North Korea, is just a demonstration that Russia is ready to escalate. NATO, on the other hand, has not demonstrated any resolve to counter such alliances. I don't think that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was unaware of the presence of North Korean troops in Ukraine, for example, a week or two ago. It is clear that the Koreans did not appear here yesterday. The killed Koreans, including 6 officers, are not all of them. There are many more. This is what Russian telegram channels are reporting. Information is leaking out, and it is reported that there are now orders not to leave them on the battlefield, not to surrender, because this could show the whole world that they are already here. But this is not because Putin is afraid of Kim Jong-un's condemnation. He doesn't care. Remember that Kim Jong-un made a statement about a month ago, saying that if the West threatens North Korea, it will initiate alliances against the West, against the United States of America. Today, we can really see the presence of North Korean troops in Ukraine as their response to the threats they say they hear from the West. Вони будуть виправдовувати, як і росіяни. От історія із зараз загостренням на кордоні Північної Кореї та Південної Кореї. They'll justify it like the Russians. The North-South Korean border escalation followed South Korea's drone launch over Pyongyang, dropping leaflets critical of Kim Jong-un. He responded by destroying 2 roads, claiming South Korea is a U.S. vassal, demonstrating his readiness to send troops. Ratification in the State Duma speaks to the international context. This is important for Putin, especially after Joseph Biden signaled, "I'm ready to talk to the Kremlin." The Kremlin quickly responded. An hour later, Peskov stated that Russia was ready for negotiations, considering regional threats. He claimed that Washington, London, and Europe are united against Russia, suggesting a need to end the war. Peskov also noted that Russia needs security guarantees so that no one attacks it, and emphasized that if something happens, they have North Korea to pull up, and it will be unpleasant for everyone. This is indeed true, and they are shaping their international vision and international law according to their understanding. Now this alliance consists of 3 countries, and I think Beijing may join. I do not exclude that they will even sign a treaty that will be ratified. How will others react to this? On October 17th-18th, NATO defense ministers will meet to decide how to change the strategy in relations with Russia. Я просто вже, знаєте, не беруся там робити якісь прогнози, тому що складається таке враження, що в Європі або сліпі, або глухі. Нічого не бачать, нічого не хочуть чути. 17-18 жовтня там буде засідання міністрів оборони країн НАТО, які будуть вирішувати, як їм змінити. It is worth noting that there is still a Russia-NATO commission, which was established before 2022, but ceased to function after the annexation of Crimea. A similar NATO-Ukraine commission was established last year. Imagine that after 3 years of large-scale invasion, NATO has only now managed to sit down at the negotiating table. To discuss the situation. I am now expressing an objective criticism of NATO and the entire Western world because you refuse to see and hear what is happening in the public sphere in this dictatorial world. Although intelligence warns you of serious threats, politicians do not change their decisions. I urge you, really change your decisions faster, because you will have a very big problem. German intelligence says that by 2030, Russia may well be preparing and implementing an attack on NATO countries within the next 2 to 3 years. I want them to see, hear, and be more active. At the same time, the outgoing NATO Secretary General does make outlandish statements and mentions Angela Merkel, thanks to whom Putin was able to build up his forces and resources with money from Germany. Not only Nord Stream, which everyone remembers, even though it has been undermined, but also other economic ties help Putin prepare for a full-scale war. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is firm in his statements, declaring NATO will not be intimidated by Russia's threats during his visit to the headquarters coordinating assistance to Ukraine. He took office on October 1st, visited Kyiv on October 3rd, and met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on October 10th to discuss the situation in Ukraine. Mark Rutte also visited the alliance's mission in Germany, which coordinates Western military assistance to Ukraine, NSAU, and emphasized that NATO will not be intimidated by Russian threats. He sent a message to Putin: "We will do whatever it takes to make sure that Putin does not achieve his goal and that Ukraine wins." But such statements need to be heard not only in the Kremlin. These statements are nice, but to be honest, I have heard similar ones from Stoltenberg and others many times before. Sorry to be so blunt, but while they are degenerating the solution, we see that North Korea, China, and Russia are taking concrete steps to escalate.
Ми зараз з вами, Іро, проаналізували те, що Північна Корея, Китай і Росія конкретно роблять кроки для ескалації.
And NATO only talks about victory, although it is obvious that today Russia is not fighting against Ukraine alone, but together with other countries. This was discussed when the DPRK started supplying its own missiles to Russia. Our Western partners also supply us with shells, but the difference is that Russia attacked us, not us attacking Russia. This means that Russia, having failed to achieve its goals, wants to involve other countries to continue its attack on Ukraine. This needs to be separated into black and white for everyone in the West, including the West. If you want Ukraine to win, then finally tell us how you see this victory. What does victory mean in your understanding? Because for 3 years now they have been saying, Ukraine will win. It will win, but no one tells us how. At the end of his term, Jens Stoltenberg stated that Ukraine would win if admitted to NATO with its current territories, even repeating this in an interview with Interfax. Why doesn't current NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte address this? What does he mean by Ukraine will win? The time for statements is over. We need concrete decisions and actions.
Вибачте, але вже час заяв він прийшов. Прийшов час конкретних рішень, конкретних артикуляцій того, як ми можемо стримувати російську агресію.
Today, tactically, I emphasize tactically, in order to have a pause while you think about it, while you come up with some new verbal constructions, some nice statements in the West about how Ukraine should win, you should at least officially announce your decision to strike Russia with your long-range missiles.
Своє рішення про удари бити вашими далекобійними ракетами по території Росії. Ще раз наголошую,
I emphasize once again, in tactical terms, so that we can at least understand that we have some kind of respite. The intensity of the fighting has been so intense over the past 3 years that I don't think I've ever seen a war with such intensity in the history of mankind. There were even breaks earlier, and today Sumy was free of shelling at night for the first time this year. Sumy for the first time this year. But what are we talking about? The West is concerned, saying that Ukraine can. Our politicians should have such rhetoric, and it is generally present. I can't say that Zelensky chooses his words carefully about what is happening here, especially since he knows more, as do our other ministers. Sybiga is now working in the European Union so that we can make a statement at the EU summit on October 17th, 18th. This is very good. So if Mark Rutte is so persistent and consistent in his support for Ukraine, let him tell us who is ready to announce the decision to give us permission to strike at Russian territory and destroy warehouses. The North Korean shells are coming there. We are not going to go to war with North Korea, but their shells, their soldiers, if they are here, are our legitimate target. We have the right and the obligation to destroy them. We don't have enough weapons. We simply don't have enough in our warehouses. But you can't decide to give doses. It's something that has to be done at this level. And then you can really talk about how Ukraine will win and how you see it. I'm all for Ukraine winning. We all are. But these statements are frankly tired. Trump claimed Putin warned him about invading Ukraine and that he contained the dictator, but this never happened. He referred to the invasion as the apple of his eye, while insisting Putin wouldn't act. Yet the invasion still occurred. Of course, Trump blames Biden and says that he hasn't even talked to Putin for over a year, although we already knew that no talks ever worked there. And Trump says he's going to end this war. It's just like that. And again, it goes no further than statements. Or I just thought about it. He constantly, in fact, every week brings the same thing to the surface about how he would end the war. What is the purpose of this? It's not for us. It's not for us. I agree. We take it upon ourselves all the time. But who is watching us? Forget what Trump says now. You've already heard it 100 times. Just take the first statement when he said that Biden is to blame for everything. Why does he say that? Because he has an election coming up. Trump is now engaged in primitive populism, collecting votes, and his task is to win. Therefore, what Trump is saying now, divide by 16 and reject it. But let's be aware of what Trump's intentions are for ending the war, reconciliation. He has talked about it, he has not changed his plans, and he is not going to change them. As for his sanctions policy, for example, he said, I will lift all sanctions. Why? For the world to develop. In his understanding, this is how the world should develop. Biden seems to be repeating the mistakes of trying to denuclearize North Korea, which I believe is a wrong approach, similar to what I criticized Trump for. Trump's claim that Putin attacked Ukraine because Biden is president is aimed at the American electorate, as many Americans and European officials lack a deep understanding of the war's complexities. At least, I will say this. Those who speak publicly do not want to convey to their voters the essence of this war. Why did Putin start it? Because Putin's ultimate goal is not just Ukraine, but, as German intelligence said yesterday, Putin is harboring the idea of driving the American military out of Europe in order to continue the annexation and, in fact, military expansion throughout Europe. Because he realizes that European military forces are weaker than Russian ones now. This has been said for a long time. Trump today says, yes, he is speculating on this because it is not his legacy, but the legacy of his predecessors and successors who have maintained high defense spending. This helps America remain the largest and most powerful country in the world and live in relative security. Their tactic now is to accept Ukrainian casualties to prevent Chinese and Russian military expansion in America, which many Americans support. Trump recognizes this, suggesting that if he were in charge, there would be no war and lower costs. The reality is that the American military isn't directly involved in this conflict, unlike in past wars like Iraq, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. There were dead people. Everything is okay. Look how great Biden's idea was. He can brag about this part, but he failed to convey this message to his voters. And this is a big problem in the Democratic campaign right now. Trump claims that if the U.S. had spent less, Putin wouldn't have attacked, and we wouldn't have allocated $300 billion to Ukraine, questioning how that money is being used. He's exploiting this situation and will likely continue to do so. Trump, unfortunately, remains a populist, not a bigot, and he lies a lot. The U.S. is experiencing a crisis similar to those faced by many countries, where empty political promises attract voters. A primitive power struggle is underway, with Trump convincing many Americans that he is more effective than Kamala Harris in ending the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East.
Що він більш ефективніший у припиненні війни в Україні, на Близькому Сході, ніж Камала Харріс.
Trump claims he will destroy Iran's oil and nuclear facilities, which Biden seeks to prevent to maintain global oil stability. The Democrats benefit from a 70% increase in Russian oil exports as it keeps prices stable. Trump is leveraging this situation, urging Israel to hold off on actions until after the November 5th vote, with everyone playing their own game. Valery, thank you for your always realistic and professional comments. We have to assess the true picture because this is the 11th year of war. Thank you for your time. Mr. Valeriy, take care and see you soon. Good luck. Valeriy Klochok, head of the Vezha Civic Center. Please subscribe as well. More than 2,000 people spent this early morning of Tuesday, October 15th with us online live on 24, for which we are very grateful. Take care, believe in the armed forces of Ukraine, see you, and we will win.